The jungle air bit at Robert Lake's exposed skin, a stark contrast to the humid warmth he was used to. No longer just a whisper, winter was clawing its way across the valleys, promising a brutal season. He grunted, hefting a freshly snared lynx over his shoulder. Its thick fur would be vital for insulation, its meat a welcome addition to his dwindling rations. Just another day in this strange new world, where a former ghost gunsmith from Danao, Philippines, found himself a hunter in a land untouched by his own time. Suddenly, a twig snapped nearby, then another, too close for a deer, too deliberate for a wild boar. Robert's instincts, honed by years of evading authorities and adapting to this unforgiving landscape, screamed danger. He dropped the lynx and faded into the dense undergrowth, his hand already on the familiar, cold grip of a Glock 19 he'd custom-built himself. A moment later, a vanguard of soldiers burst through the foliage, their leather armor and bronze helmets glinting ominously. Romans, or close enough. 80 strong, at least. Robert scoffed internally. 80 men for one hunter? Guess word of his ghost sightings was spreading. There! He went that way, a gruff voice barked. Robert didn't wait. He moved, a phantom blur through the trees, leaping over fallen logs, scrambling up steep embankments. He wasn't running from them, he was luring them, positioning them. He had a warehouse full of unsold hardware back home, and a sudden need for raw materials. This wasn't just about survival anymore, it was about resupply. He pivoted behind a gnarled oak, the Glock spitting fire. 3 soldiers dropped, their surprised cries cut short. Their companions surged forward, swords drawn, but Robert was already gone, a shadow flitting deeper into the jungle. He unleashed controlled bursts, conserving ammunition, each shot a precise, deadly whisper. These weren't the poorly trained thugs he sometimes encountered back on Earth, these were disciplined, well-equipped soldiers. But they were still no match for modern ballistics and a man who could vanish and reappear like smoke. He bounced between cover, his AR-15, slung across his back, ready to chew through larger groups. He moved with a dancer's grace, honed by years of working in tight spaces and quick escapes. When he had a good cluster, the AR-15 sang, ripping through armor and flesh with brutal efficiency. Within minutes, the jungle floor was littered with bodies. He kept moving, drawing them further, thinning their numbers. After what felt like an eternity but was likely only 20 minutes of relentless engagement, the last of the 80, or perhaps just 80, men lay still. Robert surveyed the carnage, a grim satisfaction settling over him. He started stripping the bodies, quickly, efficiently. Swords, shields, breastplates, helmets, all valuable. He left only their simple tunics, a macabre statement to their sudden, inexplicable defeat. With his arms laden, Robert focused. A shimmering, almost imperceptible distortion appeared in the air before him, coalescing into the familiar outlines of a solid wooden door. It was his personal gateway, a unique interface to his hidden home, a trick he'd discovered months ago. He opened it, the mundane squeak of hinges jarring in the silent jungle, and tossed the collected gear inside. He repeated the process, bringing in armfuls of loot until all the usable equipment was gone. Back in his workshop, the door vanishing behind him, Robert felt a familiar hum of contentment. He crossed to his computer setup, a relic from his past life that still miraculously functioned in this world. The screen glowed, displaying a strange interface, an exchange system he'd stumbled upon. Here, he could sell the looted arms and armor, the ethereal currency he earned convertible into the specific coin of whatever region he chose to travel to next. It was his lifeline, his connection to trade in a world that couldn't see him. Months before, back on Earth, the air in Manila had been thick with unspoken tension, a different kind of war. Robert Lake, then known as Roberto Danao, felt it acutely. His latest, meticulously prepared application for a gunsmith license lay rejected on the government official's desk. More prohibitions, Mr. Danao. More requirements, the bureaucrat had said, his tone dismissive, his eyes betraying a hint of smug satisfaction. The capital must maintain its authority over certain industries. Roberto had clenched his fists, the rage a bitter taste in his mouth. Imperialist Tagalogs, he fumed internally. Always trying to suppress the Visayans, to keep them from rising. They, the supposed majority of the country, treated like second-class citizens in their own land. All his investment, the years of perfecting his craft, the inheritance from his ancestors, the very blood and sweat poured into his state-of-the-art, hidden workshop in the mountains of Danao, all for naught. He was a one-man gun-making machine, with blast furnaces, forges, and enough raw materials and black powder to arm a small army, yet he couldn't get a legal permit to save his life. To the gods, he'd muttered under his breath as he left the stifling office, "If this isn't fixed, I'd rather be doing business elsewhere. Anywhere. Even the ends of hell. Or wherever is that Cebuano." He spat the rare Cebuano word like a curse, its meaning, to anywhere, even the ends of hell, a defiant declaration against the injustice. He arrived home late that night, the winding mountain roads of Danao City a familiar comfort, even as frustration gnawed at him. He collapsed onto his couch, feeling utterly drained, and drifted into a restless sleep. He woke up with a jolt. Something was off. The temperature was different, strangely cool for the middle of June in Danao. The humidity was wrong. He stepped outside, expecting the familiar sight of his mango trees, his banana plants. Instead, a vast, emerald lawn stretched out for what felt like 66 yards, ending abruptly at an unseen barrier. Beyond it, distant trees he'd never seen before, trees that looked like they belonged in Europe, stood sentinel under a sky that felt older. "My mango trees," he murmured, his voice a bewildered whisper. "My bananas." He was sure he'd gone bananas himself. He surveyed the impossible scene, then tested the boundary. The entire factory, his home and workshop, moved with him, perfectly centered within its strange, pristine yard. He was no longer in Danao. He was nowhere he recognized.
The whispering woods and a name's reflection.
The cool, unfamiliar air sent a shiver down Roberto's spine, a stark contrast to the usual clammy heat of Danao City. He stared at the alien foliage, the broad leaves and towering trees unlike anything in his familiar Cebuano landscape. Mangoes and bananas were replaced by what looked like oak, and were those pines in the distance? It was like stepping into a history book, a European one at that. His gaze swept across the invisible boundary of his property. He could see a dirt path winding through the trees, and beyond it, more of this strange, untouched wilderness. No tricycles, no jeepneys, no familiar urban sprawl. Just the rustling of leaves and the chirping of unseen birds. What in the seven hells happened? Roberto thought, his mind racing. One moment he was stewing in his anger in his hidden Danao workshop, the next he was here. Wherever he was. He pinched himself. Solid. The familiar scent of gun oil and metal clung to his clothes. His workshop, a chaotic yet meticulously organized space, was exactly as he'd left it. The hum of the generator, inexplicably still running, was a reassuring constant. He walked to the edge of his property again, peering through the invisible wall. A lone figure, clad in rough-spun tunic and leather sandals, ambled down the path, leading a donkey laden with what looked like firewood. As the person drew closer, Roberto called out, his voice clear in the morning air. "Hoi! Excuse me!" The figure didn't even flinch, continuing on their way as if Roberto wasn't there. Roberto tried again, louder this time, waving his arms frantically. Still nothing. It was like he was a ghost, an echo of a man in a world that couldn't perceive him. The frustration he'd felt in that Manila office surged back, potent and familiar. Ignored. Dismissed. Unseen. It was a recurring theme in his life, this feeling of being just outside the edges of the world, his skills and passions unrecognized. He slumped back towards his house, running a hand through his already messy hair. "Spibmuo," he muttered, the curse feeling more relevant than ever. To anywhere, even the ends of hell, well, it seemed the gods had taken him quite literally.
A taste of home.
His stomach rumbled, loudly protesting the surreal circumstances. To say that he is not panicking is an understatement, but food comes first, panic next. Even in a different dimension, a man needed to eat. He headed to the kitchen, a welcome island of familiarity in this sea of strangeness. Miraculously, the refrigerator was still humming, stocked with supplies. He pulled out a pack of chorizo de Cebu, its spicy, garlicky aroma a sudden, comforting punch to his senses. He cracked a couple of eggs into a pan, the sizzle a familiar sound. Soon, the rich scent of frying chorizo filled the kitchen, mingling with the aroma of freshly cooked rice he'd prepared in his automatic cooker. He piled a generous serving onto a plate, the vibrant red of the sausage, the sunny yellow of the eggs, and the pristine white of the rice a welcome sight. He ate quickly, savoring each bite. It was just chorizo de Cebu, eggs, and rice, but in this alien world, it felt like the most luxurious meal he'd ever had. It grounded him, reminded him of home, of the life he'd left behind, and the one he now had to build.
The exchange system, a digital intrusion.
With his hunger satiated, Roberto's thoughts returned to the inexplicable. He walked over to his desktop computer, his main design hub, and pressed the power button. The screen flickered to life, showing the familiar Mahalsoft operating system, but then an unexpected alert popped up, stark white against the dark background. Exchange System Installation. MW, do you want to install the multi-world e-exchange system? Roberto blinked. What in the world is this? Multi-world? He wasn't a fan of those crazy isekai stories or far-fetched science fiction novels. His interests began and ended with guns and war. This alert felt like something out of one of those absurd fantasies. His main desktop held all his precious blueprints and weapon designs, years of work. The thought of them disappearing or being corrupted sent a spike of fear through him. He had a few spare laptops, thankfully. He pulled one out, an older model he sometimes used for less critical tasks. He booted it up. Sure enough, the same ominous message greeted him. His eyes drifted to a small question mark icon in the top right corner. Intuitively, he clicked it. Another pop-up appeared, detailing information about this exchange system. It described itself as an avenue to buy and sell items across other worlds. At the bottom, a new button glowed, Chat with the system. Robert mused, a flicker of curiosity overriding his caution. He was a practical man, and this was an unknown variable. He clicked it. A small chat window appeared, minimalist and direct. His first question, typed out with an engineer's bluntness, will installing this system reformat the laptop? The answer was immediate and terse, yes. Roberto frowned. What about my old data and the other programs I bought licenses for from that expensive Mahalsoft? He typed, annoyance creeping into his tone. The system replied, equally concisely, old system will be preserved and be part of the e-exchange operating system. Preserved? Part of it? That sounded complicated. Still, the promise of preserving his data was a crucial factor. He decided to try out this new operating system. He clicked Install. A progress bar appeared, moving at a glacial pace. Slow download, he muttered, impatient. After what felt like an eternity, another alert flashed, plug-in laptop. Battery 50%. Requires 100% for conversion, installation, and data migration. Roberto scoffed, but he complied, plugging the laptop into a wall socket. Miraculously, there was power in his clandestine factory, a baffling detail he'd worry about later. The message on the screen changed, converting laptop. Conversion. Roberto's brow furrowed. What conversion? I thought this was installation. There was no cancel button. He was stuck. He watched the progress bar inch forward, a strange mix of apprehension and resignation settling over him. Crossing his fingers was never a Cebuano thing, but he found himself doing it anyway.
Inventory and impractical ideas.
Leaving the laptop to cycle through its mysterious conversion, Roberto decided to turn off his desktop for now. This digital mystery could wait. He needed to survey his surroundings, and more importantly, conduct a full audit of his impressive, albeit now potentially obsolete, inventory. He walked out of his room, the vast expanse of his hidden factory unfolding before him. This guy was armed to the teeth. With a background in mechanical engineering and an additional major in a chemical engineering degree, Roberto knew his stuff when it came to weapons and their history. A crazy, almost unsettling thought flickered through his mind. What if he sold drugs here? Like how the Brits used opium to control China. He dismissed it almost immediately. Guns were his trade, his passion. His eyes swept over the racks of firearms. Over 100 M4 Type or AR-15 rifles gleamed under the workshop lights. He had a plethora of handguns, but nothing beat the classic for him, the 1911.45 caliber. He had around 35 of them. As for the Glock types and other models, he didn't even bother to count. There were well over 200. He also spotted about 20 AK-47s and roughly 50 MAC-10s. Why did I even make these? He wondered aloud, recalling how Filipinos disliked MAC-10s due to their high ammo consumption and the high cost of ammunition. His gaze then fell upon his machinery. The forge, the blast furnace, or a very capable version of it, the heavy presses, the rifling machines, all were there. But then he remembered. His ammo machines were only for reloading, not for making the actual shells or primers from scratch. That was a glaring hole in his self-sufficiency here. Need to make an ammunition factory, he murmured, adding it to the top of his mental list. He was confident he could do it, he'd just have to design and build the machines himself. So far, everything seemed to be working, but the question of where the power was coming from nagged at him. He pushed it aside. That would be for another day. Right now, he needed to survey this new world and assess his true capabilities within it. The morning sun, though alien in its surroundings, was a familiar clock. Roberto's watch read 7 a.m. He used its position in the sky as a rough compass, deciding to walk towards it, deeper into this new world. As he strode to the edge of his property, the terrain before him seemed to flatten and darken to a deep blue in the distance, the ocean, undoubtedly. It looked impossibly far, maybe 8 miles, a full day's trek if he were on foot. But here, his property followed him, making the journey less about distance and more about traversing the actual, rough, outside terrain that moved beneath his feet. As he descended what felt like a gradual mountain slope, or perhaps just a very large hill, the forest around him revealed its inhabitants. He spotted wolves, foxes, and bears, all predators. But what truly caught his eye were the deer, plentiful and seemingly unafraid. A deer in the Philippines was endangered, a protected species he'd never had the chance to hunt. Here, it was abundant. A new idea sparked. He drew his Glock 19 copy, aimed at a plump buck grazing 100 yards away, and fired. Bang! The bullet flew true, striking the deer dead. "What the hell?" he muttered, a mix of shock and revelation. "I can't go out, but a bullet can." He cautiously approached the fallen buck, testing the invisible boundary of his property. Sure enough, it was still there, an unyielding wall. He imagined a door, wished for it, and as if a divine hand had intervened, a standard wooden door materialized before him. Feeling a strange mix of amusement and a primal sense of security, he opened it and pulled the heavy deer into his domain. It was a struggle, but he managed. He closed the door, imagined it gone, and it vanished, leaving no trace. Gutting the deer was a messy, unsentimental affair, but now he had meat. The journey was disorienting. When he faced outwards, traversing the new terrain, it was rough underfoot, demanding he navigate around trees and uneven ground. But if he turned to face inward, towards his factory, the ground beneath him flattened and became easy to walk on, as if he were on perfectly level ground inside his home. As he continued his descent, the land opened up, revealing the distinct curvature of the planet he'd instinctively named Earth. The beach, now visibly closer, was strikingly white. Through a break in the trees, he spotted a clearing in the distance, and the unmistakable sight of a settlement, marked by rising smoke. He'd need to be cautious. He might not understand their language, or they his. It took him about 6 hours to reach the beach, a distance that felt like a mere 5 kilometers, though the rough terrain had made it feel much longer. He stood at the edge of the vast, flat ocean, a ghost on a pristine, alien shore. From his vantage point on the pristine beach, Roberto could discern at least 3, maybe 5, distinct plumes of smoke rising from the interior. One seemed about 3 miles to the north, well inland. Another drifted from the southwest, roughly 5 miles in, also inland. The rest, scattered and fainter, appeared to be from temporary camps or bases. It was getting late, the sun dipping lower, so he decided to focus on processing his deer and getting some much-needed rest. "Why are they all so far inland?" he mumbled to himself, finding it perplexing. A coastal settlement would have been the logical choice. After finishing the butchering and cleaning up the mess, He headed back to his workshop, the drone of the generator a familiar comfort. He glanced at the laptop he'd left to its mysterious conversion. "It should be done by now," Roberto muttered, eyeing the screen expectantly. A wave of apprehension washed over Roberto. This laptop, his general use one, should have been safe. Yet, its conversion felt like a violation. A big lump formed in his throat as he checked his work desktop computer. It too, along with all his other laptops and even his smartphones, had been transformed by the exchange system. Did I make a mistake? He fretted, though at least all his data was still there. I had no choice, he muttered, accepting the impossible. He continued browse the sleek new interface. Goodbye, Mahalsoft. No more Word, no more spreadsheets. He sighed, but found that the new system's apps were similar, even improved. Knowing that knowledge is always key, he searched for learn a new language quickly in a day. Several books appeared, their descriptions claiming language acquisition not just in a day, but simply by opening the book and letting it read his eyes. Read my eyes? The concept confused him. He refined his search to all languages. More academic books on language patterns appeared, good, but not real quick. There had to be something faster, he thought, given the absurdity of his situation. After a few more pages, a final book caught his eye, Universal Translator. Its description promised to rearrange your neural pathways and create a dedicated path to quickly understand languages, through their intent of word delivery, their current emotions and the words used. The price, 5,000 Bulawan. Bulawan, he mumbled, the Cebuano word for gold. This operating system really knows me well. He mentally shelved that for now, it was a steep price. Instead, he moved to weapons. The listings were all for cold weapons, swords, spears, axes. No firearms. He was momentarily confused about how he'd even sell his guns here. Then he noticed icons beneath the descriptions, a man swinging a sword, another with a spear. He drilled down, and there it was, a model, or perhaps the seller, performing a weapon demonstration video. Eureka! He might have yelled if he were a white guy. Being Cebuano, he instead exclaimed, Kini! Meaning, oh, that's it. Or I get it now. So, you can create your own video. I should have a lot of those.
The first auction, an AR-15.
He initially considered how much to price his AR-15s, but then decided to put that on the back burner. He searched for auctions and found listings with a rule: items must have less than 10% availability in the system. This could work. He decided to auction one of his lame AR-15s, though even his lame ones were top tier. The package would include the rifle, around 5 boxes of .223 caliber ammunition, a bottle of cleaning oil, and an instruction manual. Remembering he had the PDF manual, he attached it. The only remaining question was how to deposit the physical product into the system. The answer came to him: simply take a photo of the product. Oh, he realized, checking his smartphone. Sure enough, the Exchange app had a camera option. He saved the product creation but didn't publish it yet. He walked into his armory, snapped a photo of the AR-15, and watched in disbelief as the rifle vanished from its rack. He then photographed the ammunition boxes, and they, too, disappeared. Back at his seat, he set the initial auction price at 5,000 Bulawan. He reviewed his entry, the product photo, the video demo, once he made one, the price, and the complete package. With a firm nod, he selected Publish. Roberto was a creature of habit, and while the exchange system was a startling anomaly, the rules of online commerce, even clandestine ones, were deeply ingrained. He was used to the slow burn of eBay auctions, or the calculated patience required for dark web ghost gun sales. A 3-day minimum, he decided, for his first AR-15. If it didn't hit his desired price by then, the auction would simply close, unsold. He set the parameters, blissfully unaware that in this multi-world market, slow burn was an entirely different concept. After his meal, he figured he'd head to bed, planning to trace the smoke plumes first thing in the morning. But as he tied it up, a thought struck him. This wasn't just a new online auction, it was his first night in a new world. Whoa, he murmured, a sudden urge for something real overriding his practical nature. I guess I need to go out on the beach and feel the sand and the sea. He gathered his camping gear, the kind that had mostly seen use in his own backyard, a compact tent, a trusty axe, flint, and a lamp running on kerosene. He even brought his fishing pole. He wondered what he'd catch. He never had much luck off the coast of Danao with just hooks. A peculiar excitement bubbled within him. The day was still bright, the sun around 3 p.m., plenty of time to fish. Fish or no fish, it was going to be barbecue night. His old uncle, a former scout ranger, had taught him how to start a fire without matches, but Roberto wasn't bothering with that. He had flint and some pre-made dried tinder that would catch quickly. He always remembered his uncle's other lesson: always cover your fire and let the smoke spread out. It was a habit born of caution, useful for avoiding discovery by any bad elements, a principle more vital than ever in this unknown world. With his Habagat backpack loaded with survival essentials, tent, and fishing pole, he started for the invisible boundary. Then he remembered the deer. He dropped everything. The blood had stopped draining. He worked quickly, a bit of a hack job since it was his first time, but he skinned the buck and butchered the meat into manageable portions, storing them in his large freezer. Back to his camping trip, which was really just another version of backyard camping, but in a new dimension. He set up his tent and laid out his gear. He found several dried trees nearby, perfect for fuel, and dug a small fire pit, shallow enough to cover quickly. He sparked the flint, and the tinder caught. The fire started. True to his uncle's lessons, the smoke didn't rise straight up but dispersed inland, scattering like a low-lying fog, making it nearly invisible from a distance. He kicked off his sandals, his feet sinking into the fine, white sand that reminded him of Malapascua. He spotted a few fish swimming near the shore. He cast his rod, then cursed. No damn bait, he realized, feeling like an idiot. Luckily, he spotted some worms near the water's edge, perfect for bait. Soon enough, he had a few catches, larger than dinner plates, some even around 10 pounds. He took 2 big ones back to his fridge after gutting them. For the immediate feast, he skewered one over the coals with tongs and a small grill. The other, he expertly sliced into bite-sized pieces for eating raw. He felt strangely at home here, a sense of peace washing over him. The barbecue was lavish, yet these were ordinary comforts for him. The raw fish paired with pinacurat vinegar from Iligan, and his own homegrown coconut toddy wine vinegar, the dark reddish version, astringent, no chili, to avoid the gas. Who needed rice when you had all this? He mused, then thought better of it. Of course, he had rice. He settled into his foldable canvas director's chair by a small table, enjoying his meal. After dinner, he uncorked a bottle of Bajalina from Southern Lete. It wasn't overtly strong, but like a good 13% red wine, its astringency was a perfect counterpoint to the raw fish. The fish meat was white and surprisingly boneless. He stared out at the vast sea, hoping to catch the sunset, then remembered with a mental slap to the forehead that the sun was on the other side. Just over the distant horizon, he thought he saw something. With the lingering daylight, he decided to investigate. He went back into his domain to retrieve his binoculars. As he focused on the horizon, a small white sail appeared, looking less like a modern vessel and more like something from an old painting. It was a stark reminder, he was definitely no longer in Danao. As dusk deepened, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Roberto decided against sleeping under the unfamiliar stars just yet. He'd retreat to the safety of his domain tonight, but not before observing this new world under the cover of darkness. He wanted to see what nocturnal life stirred, and perhaps glimpse the people who lit those distant fires. His thoughts drifted from his recent auction. He wasn't just a maker of homemade guns, or ghost guns, as the TV series often dramatically quoted Spader saying, "Ghost guns of Danao." He also possessed an arsenal of advanced gadgets. Many were hack jobs made by clever relatives, but he also had top-tier imported gear, night vision cameras, complete with thermal and infrared capabilities, like those used by special forces. Roberto was amused by the sheer irony. Why had he ever bothered trying to go legit when operating outside the government scope had been so much more profitable, allowing him to acquire all these tools? As a precaution, he set up 6 posts from fallen wood debris in a hexagonal pattern around his immediate outdoor perimeter. On each, he mounted proximity alert alarms and cameras, ensuring he wouldn't be blindsided. With his night vision goggles donned, his handgun holstered, and his AR-15 at the ready, he felt almost overpowered. However, the bottle of Bahalina had done its job. Feeling a little tipsy and realizing this was no state for heightened vigilance, he decided to temporarily abandon his observation post. He left his gear and retreated into his protective domain. From the safety of his living room, he peered out. To his left, to the north, he saw a faint flicker, the fire he'd spotted earlier. He raised his binoculars. Indeed, there were people. A feeling of trepidation washed over him. He was invisible, untouchable, but what if his existence here wasn't welcome? A few non-threatening animals came and went in the early night hours. But the full scope of this new world's nocturnal activity would have to wait. He needed rest. The next morning, Roberto woke to the familiar grumble of his stomach. Without a second thought, he prepared his usual breakfast: chorizo de Cebu, fried eggs, and a generous heap of rice. After enjoying his meal, he meticulously attended to his oral hygiene, a small ritual of normalcy in his increasingly abnormal life. His next task was to erase any trace of his overnight stay on the beach. He diligently cleaned up his camp, leaving no sign that anyone had been there. Every stray twig, every displaced stone was returned to its original place, a testament to the discipline his uncle had instilled. Once the area was pristine, he headed back to his domain for a much-needed bath. As he stepped into the bathroom, he froze, shocked by what he saw. He screamed like a girl, a high-pitched, involuntary shriek. In the mirror, there was another person, a face he knew yet didn't recognize. Then, he realized, it was just him. Only this was his face at 18 years old. He hadn't noticed his younger skin yesterday, too preoccupied with the impossible circumstances, and he hadn't taken a bath or looked into a mirror since his arrival. After the bath, driven by habit, he checked his computer. The exchange system showed that the current bid price for his AR-15 was already at 15,000 Bulawan. Despite the tempting offer, and the option to close the auction then and there, he felt obliged to honor his promise of a 3-day auction. He'd let it run. He then searched for books on the planet he was on, hoping to find some context, a map, anything. But the system returned nothing. Not a single entry. It seemed to be planet-agnostic, offering no localized information.
First reconnaissance.
Deciding to investigate the faint lights he'd seen to the north, Roberto ventured out of his domain, fully packed in military gear. He made guns, yes, but actual combat experience was zero. He viewed this excursion as training in progress, a crucial step in understanding this new world. He started by walking along the shore, but soon moved to the edge of the forest for better cover. He arrived at the location of the lights about an hour and a half later, his pace slow and cautious. He frequently checked his thermal scope and binoculars, ensuring no hidden dangers lurked. What he found wasn't a military camp, but more like a resort. People milled about, dressed in what looked like togas or tunics. Since he still couldn't be seen, he decided to retreat back into his domain, from where he could survey the area more closely and, crucially, listen to their language without fear of detection. From the concealed safety of his domain, Roberto studied the inhabitants of the resort. They were indeed human, very much like him. The males appeared to be around his height, roughly 5 feet 3 inches, while the females were about a head shorter. They all wore simple tunics, echoing the style of historical Romans. Their language was utterly unintelligible. Latin? Etruscan? He mused. He even entertained the absurd notion that perhaps he could grow taller, now that his body had seemingly regressed in age. Nah, he quickly dismissed, best to study them for now. Though, maybe an all-meat diet from Hiron will make me taller. Their diet, he observed, appeared to be primarily grain-based, though definitely not rice. It seemed similar to wheat or barley. While they did consume meat, it seemed to be a luxury reserved mostly for the guests, and even then, not in large quantities. Unable to comprehend their conversations, Roberto simply stared, hoping by sheer force of will to decode their utterances. He spent the rest of that day and the following night observing the resort, noting their movements and listening to the rhythms of their daily lives as a silent, invisible sentinel. He also kept an eye on his laptop, eager for the auction to conclude.
The road less traveled.
On his third day in this new world, after another hearty breakfast of chorizo, eggs, and rice, Roberto ventured out from the resort area. He quickly discovered a wide road, easily accommodating 2 carriages side by side. Where does it go? He wondered aloud. He decided to follow it, not by conventional means, but by continuing to travel incognito within his mobile domain. He maintained his vigilant, slow pace, always scanning the surroundings with his thermal scope and binoculars, even as the road stretched out before him, inviting further exploration. It wasn't long before the road led Roberto to a city. A walled city, of course, a common sight in historical records. Its newest defenses, the outer walls, appeared to be constructed of a mix of concrete and stone, though he couldn't discern the exact composition from his distance. The older, inner walls were clearly massive timber. This was a growing town, he mused. Still in his incognito mode, he strolled nonchalantly towards the main gate. Guards stood watch, but they seemed largely indifferent to who entered or exited, a stark contrast to the stringent checks he'd grown accustomed to back home. Maybe you just shouldn't look dangerous when you visit, he thought. Inside, he pulled out a pencil and paper, beginning to map the town, meticulously estimating distances and angles. His instincts as an engineer kicked in. He navigated towards what he presumed was the town center, looking for government offices. He also spotted various structures that appeared to be stores, though without understanding the language or the signs, he couldn't be certain. Nevertheless, it was clearly a civilized society, complete with a visible presence of local troops guarding its peace. With a fairly complete map of the town sketched out, he retreated to his domain for the day. He immediately checked the exchange auction. His eyes widened. The final bid for his AR-15 package had reached a staggering 37,000 Bulawan. The new owner, whose profile showed a photo of him proudly holding the rifle, was named Ranso. Roberto was ecstatic with the automated system. He hadn't expected such a phenomenal result, though a fleeting thought crossed his mind that he might have undersold it. Without hesitation, he used his newfound wealth to purchase the Universal Translator book. He opened it, and a strange sensation washed over him as the description promised. It was done, he mused, but then a wave of doubt. Did it actually work? He wasn't sure. He'd just have to try. Roberto held the Universal Translator book, a sense of anticlimax washing over him. The description had been so grand. The way it worked, according to the brief on the screen, was that he simply needed to attempt to converse with a person, and that person's feelings towards him would be conveyed. Not clear on what that meant, maybe expression, combined with perception and intent? He puzzled. There was certainly no text translation option, no instant understanding of the alien signs he'd seen in the city. He felt, for a moment, bamboozled by this supposed omnitool. Then he remembered the currency conversion option he'd glimpsed earlier. Frustrated with the translator's enigmatic instructions, he navigated back to the exchange system's main interface. He clicked on the Convert Credits button. A new screen loaded, displaying a list of realms and regions. His eyes scanned the list, searching for anything familiar, anything that might correspond to this ancient, Mediterranean-esque world. Finally, under a section marked Active Nexus Zones, he found it. Realm, Natubil People, Natubi Region, Vesperia Current Locale, Town Castillos, meaning, Fortress Citadel. And below that, the exchange rates. 1 Bulawan, Universal Credit, equals 500 Solidi, local currency. He scrolled down further, and a new section appeared, detailing the denominations of the local currency. Local currency denominations, Vesperia, Natubil. 1 Solidus, gold coin. 10 denarii, silver coins, equals 1 solidus. 10 asses, bronze coins, equals 1 denarius. Roberto did the math. The 5,000 Bulawan for the Universal Translator translated to a staggering 2.5 million solidi. Bulawan, he murmured, the Cebuano word for gold. This operating system really knows me well. It seemed the system understood him on a more profound level than he understood it. The price was exorbitant, but his recent auction earnings meant he could afford it. He had 37,000 Bulawan, making him incredibly wealthy in this world's currency. He looked back at the Universal Translator description, This will rearrange your neural pathways and create a dedicated path to quickly understand languages through their intent of word delivery, their current emotions, and the words used. It still sounded like voodoo to his mechanically-minded brain, but the money was spent, the book used. All he could do now was try to talk to someone and see if this bizarre read my eyes method actually worked. He still wasn't sure. He'd just have to find someone to talk to. Here's the calculation for his money now. Total Bualawan, 37,000. Bualawan spent on Universal Translator, 5,000. Remaining Bualawan, 37,000 minus 5,000 is equal to 32,000 Bualawan. Now, if he wants to see the denominations by converting just one Bualawan, since the system forces full Bualawan conversions and he's checking denominations, not mass converting his entire fortune yet. Conversion rate, 1 Bualawan equals 500 solidi. So, for 1 Bualawan solidi, 1 Bualawan times 500 solidi per Bualawan equals 500 solidi. Now, breaking those 500 solidi down into the smaller denominations. Denarii, since 1 solidus equals 10 denarii, then 500 solidi times 10 denarii per solidus equals 5,000 denarii. Arses, since 1 denarius equals 10 arses, then 5,000 denarii times 10 arses per denarius equals 50,000 arses. So, converting a single Bualawan would yield 500 solidi, 5,000 denarii, 50,000 arses. This is what Roberto would see as the denominations available from a single Bualawan conversion. He wouldn't convert his entire remaining 32,000 Bualawan just yet, as he's likely still just exploring the system's functions and seeing the denominations. A new prompt popped up on the screen, demanding confirmation. Naturally, Roberto clicked yes. Then, another message appeared, almost immediately, bringing a wry twist to his lips. First-time transactions are free. Subsequent auctions will incur a 5% commission. Every currency conversion will incur a charge of 1 Bualawan. By closing this window, you agree to these terms, as this is the only available method. You are hereby informed. The only button below was close. Wow, Roberto muttered, a dry chuckle escaping him. So, this is where the ripoff begins, here. He shrugged. Anyway, it's free for now. The next time, I'll try to make it big. I wonder how much the cost of living here is. He had to decide what to wear next. If he wanted to speak the language here, he'd need to get down on the ground. But what to wear? Roberto was not short on disguises. He'd smuggled guns for export and even owned cosplay costumes. However, he didn't have a Roman tunic, and the local people were shorter, making it difficult to conceal a weapon. He found a white Gandalf costume he'd bought online. This should suffice, he thought, enough to conceal the weapons. He converted the staff into a shotgun. Removing the lower end would reveal the pump to load cartridges or shotgun shells. His M4, slung on his back, would be hidden by the cloak. His handgun was tucked into a shoulder holster. He tested the weapons, ensuring they worked silently. He also had a .22 caliber Beretta Model 70 with a suppressor, hidden inside an animal skin water bag, more like a boater bag, crafted to perfectly hold the gun and blend with the bag's appearance. This was his gear. He carried all his newly converted money in a set of 4 tube money containers he'd collected. The denarii fit into the largest tube, with the arses fitting into the 2 smaller ones. Underneath it all, he wore green army cargo pants, their numerous pockets perfect for hiding the rest of his wealth. He also prepared a paper where he drew a simple caricature of himself and wrote his name, Robert Lake, beside it. He began his approach to the city from a distant, hidden point, about 400 yards from the gate. When he arrived, the guards paid him no mind as he entered. All too good to be true, he thought, but he needed to test the language. He walked back towards the front gate and tried to engage a guard. He waved his hand, then pulled out the paper with his drawing. "Hello," he said, pointing at the caricature, then at himself. He pointed to his written name, Robert Lake, offering a friendly smile. The guard responded, seemingly understanding, "I am Protasio, and you are Robert Lake." "Ah, you are Protasio, yes, I am Robert Lake," Roberto repeated, his new neural pathways already working their subtle magic, allowing him to grasp the intent behind the foreign words. In what he hoped was a broken but understandable Vesperian dialect, Roberto asked for an inn to sleep in and the town's civil center to inquire about business opportunities. They conversed for a while. Roberto explained he was from Earth, a name that sounded utterly foreign to Protesio. The guard, in turn, revealed he too was a foreigner, having joined the guards for money, hailing from a town called Vindos to the west. They spoke of families, sharing a brief, unexpected connection. Finally, feeling Roberto was asking about matters beyond his station, Protesio politely, but firmly, directed him to the civil officials. The guard, clearly accustomed to judging status, perceived Roberto's Gandalf-like attire as a sign of upper class, or at least moneyed, status. Roberto bid farewell to his new friend Protesio, and nodded to the other guard, Krieger. He arrived at the town center, intending to meet the town mayor. Instead, he learned the city was overseen by a consul, a seemingly hereditary title that conferred the right to establish colonies, though not exclusively. After a brief wait, he was ushered into the presence of Consul Valerus Editanorum. Roberto's talk with Consul Valerus was lengthy. He presented his visit as a courtesy, a formal acknowledgement of the consul's leadership in Castilios. He then subtly steered the conversation towards several business opportunities. He spoke broadly of trade, of improving efficiency, of bringing new ideas to the region, allowing the consul to interpret his vague proposals with grand ambitions for Castilios and Vesperia. Consul Valerus, impressed by Roberto's demeanor and seemingly prosperous appearance, listened intently. Seeing Roberto as a potential investor or benefactor, the consul concluded their meeting by pointing him towards a particularly reputable inn. They exchanged polite farewells, and Roberto set off for the inn.
The Siren's Hearth.
The inn, a sturdy, two-story building of timber and plaster, bore a sign depicting a frothing mug and a smiling boar. The Boar's Tusk Inn, he read, the words now making sense to his newly calibrated mind. He pushed open the heavy wooden door, stepping into a warm, inviting common room filled with the scent of roasted meat and stale ale. He was surprised. Behind the counter, wiping it clean with a rag, was a woman. His experience, gleaned from Christian literature and media, had always suggested innkeeping was a male-dominated profession, especially in ancient-style settings. This woman shattered that expectation. She was about 4 feet 9 inches tall, with an hourglass figure that, while not exaggerated, was certainly noticeable in its curves, both at her bosom and her hips. Her face wasn't perfectly egg-shaped, her jaw was a little more defined, and her chin slightly longer than most, giving her a striking, almost sharp beauty. She looked up, her eyes, the color of warm honey, meeting his. "Welcome, traveler. What can the Boar's Tusk offer you?" Her voice was clear, melodic. "Greetings," Roberto replied, testing the translator. The words flowed effortlessly, a natural understanding of her intent washing over him. "My name is Robert Lake. Are you the proprietor?" A small smile touched her lips. "I am. My name is Akina. And yes, I own this inn, inherited from my father." "Akina," he repeated, a pleasant sound. "And how much for a month's stay?" he asked, getting straight to business. "A month?" Akina's eyebrows arched slightly, surprised by the long-term request. "For a room, it is 50 asses." Roberto, feeling a surge of confidence and remembering his newfound wealth, pushed it. "I will give you 100 asses. What extra service would that procure me?" Akina's eyes widened, a flicker of genuine surprise in their depths. 100 asses, she breathed, clearly taken aback by his generosity. "Well, for that, I can guarantee clean sheets every day, and a fresh towel." Roberto shook his head. "Not enough. I demand a breakfast meal, and a dinner meal, brought to my room daily." She hesitated, her gaze assessing him, the Gandalf cloak, the strange manner. Her voice dropped, a low whisper that barely carried over the common room's distant murmur. "Add 50 more, and you can have me in your bed." Roberto's eyes flickered. This was not what he'd expected from an innkeeper. But he was in a new world, and he wasn't about to say no to a pragmatic deal. "I will make it 200 asses," he countered, his voice firm, "but you must be exclusively mine for the duration of my stay." Akina's jaw dropped ever so slightly. She stared at him for a long moment, then a slow, knowing smile spread across her face. Agreed. Good, Roberto said, then paused. One more thing. Should there be a contract between us? Akina was caught completely aghast. A contract? She stammered, her face flushing. Sir, contracts are like marriages here. Binding for life. Think of it as a timed marriage, then, Roberto clarified, pulling a modern pen and a crisp sheet of paper from a pocket within his cloak. Why do you ask for such a thing? She questioned, a mix of bewilderment and grudging admiration in her tone. Roberto shrugged, a slight smile playing on his lips. I don't know. But I find your beauty simple and easy to digest. It was a strange compliment, but it was honest. He laid the paper on the counter. What should I write? She asked, clearly uncomfortable with the modern writing tools. I am not very good with writing. Roberto patiently coached her, guiding her hand as he dictated the terms, his name, her name, the 200 asses upfront, the exclusivity, the daily meals, and the monthly payment. When it was done, she pressed her thumbprint firmly beside her clumsily written name, Akina of the Boar's Tusk Inn. Roberto gave her the 200 asses, retrieved from one of his tubes. I'll pay the next 200 by the end of the month, he stipulated, as per their agreement. Akina stared at the paper Roberto had handed her, the strange, precise script and her own clumsy thumbprint sealing an unprecedented agreement. Her mind reeled. She could not think of a single room in her in befitting this man. Every chamber felt too small, too ordinary for someone who demanded such terms, and paid such an outrageous sum. Truth be told, she herself was still what one might call pure, having never entertained such an arrangement. A wave of desperation had driven her. The town's business was brutally slow, with bandits roaming the countryside making travel perilous. Travelers who did arrive were usually haggard, their morale low, and they relentlessly haggled over prices. She was still astonished that Roberto had paid so much, so easily. She had to sacrifice something, or else her family's inn, her inheritance, would surely crumble. Maybe, if I could make him stay a little longer, she thought, a fragile hope blossoming in her chest. Robert would make me his wife. He seems to be rich. So, instead of assigning him a guest room, Akina made a momentous decision. Sir, Akina said, her voice a little softer than before, I will offer you my own room. It is the best in the inn. I will prepare another for myself. Roberto raised an eyebrow, a flicker of surprise in his dark eyes. Akina didn't prepare the room, she simply led him up a creaking wooden staircase, her small hand gesturing towards a door at the end of the hall. The room was modest but clean, with a small window overlooking the street below. Your room? Roberto asked, his voice low. Why would you give your own room to a guest? Akina's gaze dropped to her hands, twisting nervously. She recounted her struggles, the dwindling business, the fear of losing the inn, the meager earnings from desperate travelers. Her voice was quiet, laced with an almost desperate honesty. I hoped that if you found comfort here, you might stay longer. And perhaps your generosity means you seek a wife, and I hope that might come true for me. Her cheeks flushed, but she met his gaze, her desperation evident. Roberto watched her, his expression unreadable. He felt no grand romantic sentiments, no deep emotion beyond the raw, carnal lust that had sparked the contract. Marriage was a serious commitment, one he wasn't ready for, especially not in a world he barely understood. Marriage is a big step, Akina, he said, choosing his words carefully, the universal translator weaving its magic. I am but a stranger in this land. Let us think it over, in due time. Akina's head lowered, a shadow passing over her face. She understood. But before she could turn away, Roberto gently raised her chin with his finger, meeting her eyes. Then, he leaned down and kissed her lips, a brief, firm press. I can't support you always, he murmured against her mouth, pulling back slightly. But I will always try to help you. Akina felt a strange mix of emotions. Shame? Or was it merely a blush? Her face burned. I'll prepare dinner, she stammered, turning abruptly to flee. But Roberto stopped her, taking her hand. Where do I put my things? She looked around the room, flustered. What things? She asked, her eyes darting to his cloak and staff. Perhaps there, she pointed to several hooks on the wall. And this chest, though I have my clothes in it. It's all right, Roberto said, a small, knowing smile. I think I can manage with the hooks. Akina bowed, still flustered, and hurried out to prepare dinner. Alone in the room, Roberto let out a long sigh. This was all a mistake, he thought, the realization hitting him hard. He'd negotiated a timed marriage with a pure, desperate woman, and now he had to figure out how to live with her while concealing his very illegal, very modern arsenal. How do I hide my weapons? Where? He went back to his domain. He found one of his chests with locks, an ammunition-grade, heavily reinforced container. Since she seems to want a husband, then I might as well go all the way, in a sense, he thought, a grim resolution forming. But he knew he'd have to warn her in the future that he might seek other females. He also retrieved a set of tools and a deadbolt-style lock that required a key to open from the outside. He quickly installed it on the inside of his new in-room door, a discreet but effective barrier. After that, he carefully arranged his few visible personal items, ensuring they didn't disturb Akina's belongings. A soft knock interrupted Roberto's thoughts. He opened the door to see Akina, carrying a tray laden with dinner. Her eyes, however, immediately darted around the room. A slight gasp escaped her lips as she noticed the newly installed deadbolt, the subtle gleam of the reinforced chest tucked into a corner, and the general air of subtle, yet undeniable, change to her familiar space. She set the tray down on the small table. I have prepared your dinner, honored guest, she began, her voice a little too formal, a little too subservient. Roberto frowned. Akina, he said, his tone firm but not unkind. You treat me like a guest. I thought you wanted a husband. Her cheeks immediately flamed scarlet. She dropped her gaze, mortified. I apologize, Robert. It is just. Stay, he interrupted, holding out a hand. Stay while I eat. And you, he gestured to the food, eat first. I'm just finishing some changes. He closed the door, then turned to her, pointing to the deadbolt. This is a new lock. It's strong. You'll need this. He pulled a gleaming, metallic key from his pocket and pressed it into her hand. Wear this, or keep it somewhere you won't lose it. These are expensive and difficult to find. He could see the weariness in her eyes, the faint signs of hunger. You're hungry, he stated more than asked. Eat. I'm not hungry right now. He gestured to the water pitcher she'd brought. But drink this. He pulled out one of his own filtered water bottles and poured some into her cup. The murky look of the inn's water had not escaped his notice. Tomorrow, he added, we'll go out to buy provisions, if possible. He then pulled out a bottle of his red wine. Here, have some of this too. As he poured it into her cup, he discreetly added a small, clear drop from a tiny vial. She took a sip. What was that? She asked, her eyebrows raised. Something to keep you going tonight, he replied with a slight smirk. The night that followed was long and intense. With Robert's 18-year-old body, full of vitality and strength, he matched Akina's raw passion. The newly secured room, transformed into a veritable fortress by Roberto's additions, truly served its purpose, ensuring their privacy. The next morning, the soft light of dawn filtered into the room. Akina was still sound asleep, utterly exhausted and sore. Roberto, however, was already awake, feeling refreshed despite the strenuous night. He gently woke her. Forgive me, Robert, she murmured, her eyes fluttering open, a flush rising to her face. I haven't made breakfast. I'm so sore, I don't know if I can even work. It's all right, Robert assured her, leaning over her. He had a sudden concern. But what about the other customers? Won't they need breakfast? Akina managed a weak laugh, burying her face in the pillow. Other customers? Robert, you are the only one I've had in 2 months. His eyes widened slightly at that revelation. 2 months? So that's why she was so desperate. He chuckled. Well, it's okay then. His voice softened, a playful glint in his eyes. And besides, he added, I'm on morning wood. Without waiting for a reply, he embraced her, and they were at it again. Afterward, he let her drift back to sleep. He nudged her gently. "Akina," he whispered, "do you have the keys to the rest of the inn? I want to explore, maybe help you out."